Hey everybody, I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us for ILTV's weekly program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. We want to give you, our viewers, a chance to have your questions answered by Professor Dershowitz, one of America's greatest legal minds. He's a leading expert on criminal and constitutional law, civil liberties, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. Hello, Professor Dershowitz.
Hi.
All right, we have some special guests here for you today, so let's begin.
Great.
I understand that you've actually just completed yet another book, this time focusing on making the case against the BDS movement. Now, after writing nearly 40 books, what prompted you to write this book, and what are your main messages?
Well, I wrote the case against BDS really as a primer for college students who are facing BDS every day on university campuses. Just like I written the book, The Case for Israel, almost 20 years ago, to provide ammunition for students on campus and around the country to be able to fight against the case against Israel. Right now, BDS is very prominent on university campuses, and students keep calling me and asking me for ammunition to use. They know that I debated at the Oxford Union and won. I debated against Cornel West in Dallas and won, and that they want to hear the arguments that I've accumulated over the last 10 or 15 years against BDS. So the book starts with the history of BDS, with the players, and it basically proves what I argue in the subtitle, namely why singling out Israel for boycott is both anti-Semitic and anti-peace. And the most important part of it, it really is anti-peace. It makes the prospects for peace far more difficult. And so my goal in writing the book is to make available copies, free or at very, very small expense, to college students all over the country. I did the same thing with Case for Israel. I'm waiving all my royalties in order to bring the price down. And I've gotten already some volunteers, people who went to colleges years ago, and they're going to buy, 100 copies at a discounted price and provide them to the Hillels or Chabads or other pro-Israel organizations on campus so that they can be distributed to the students, and the students will be able to have an easily accessible reference book to make the case against the BDS in every form that it's being made on university campuses.
Well, this is the perfect way to segue into our guests who are visiting us today. Joining us in the studio are two young activists who have also dedicated themselves to fighting against BDS. Chen Mazig is an energetic young Israeli of Iraqi descent who served in the Israeli army as a coordination officer, where he helped the IDF with solving problems with the Palestinians in the occupied territories. For the last 8 years, he has worked on college campuses around the world fighting BDS, and a year ago, he was actually attacked by a mob at the University College London while working. Take a look at this.
It's a familiar scene, unfortunately. I've experienced it myself at universities. Look, if you can't answer arguments, you scream, you yell, you threaten, you try to shut down the opponent. We win when we have an opportunity to present both sides of the issues. They try to win by simply shutting down the anti-BDS side and by threatening violence and by creating, to use the metaphor that is used on campuses today, unsafe spaces for pro-Israel advocates.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like him to tell us a little bit about what happened on that day.
Sure.
It was disturbing. Just to seeing this video again is disturbing. I've been a speaker. I've been harassed on college campuses many times because of my story. I'm talking about my family coming from Iraq and North Africa, and then how I was almost killed during the Second Intifada, how I served as an openly gay commander in the humanitarian unit of the Israeli army, coordinating with the Palestinians to promote peace. And I think this story is something that they don't want to hear on college campuses. And oftentimes I'm harassed, I'm attacked. And this case in UCL was very, it was shocking to see 200 people trying to break through windows, trying to break through doors just to shut me down. This event was so terrible that the president of the university invited me to come back. And in January 2018, I returned to UCL, and I mean, the fact that there was 5 police cars and hundreds of policemen, that I felt that this like securing the venue pushed out the protesters. About 100 protesters came out this time.
Well, you're the nightmare of the BDS group, because you are not an Ashkenazi Jew. You have experienced suffering at the hands of Arabs. Your family has. Yeah. You're openly gay, so you're guilty of pink washing. You know what pink washing is? Yeah. Pink washing is the accusation that Israel is supportive of gay, transgender, and lesbian rights only to cover what they do to Palestinians. And you're an eyewitness to Israel not being an apartheid country and being an openly democratic country. And they need to shut you down, because if you get to speak and present your case, it destroys their case. So kol hakavod, keep doing it. And if you need any legal assistance in what you're doing, I'll give you put my name on speed dial.
Well, and this is your time to ask a question, because I know you did want to ask the professor for some advice, right?
Yeah, I've been following Professor Dershowitz, and I've read every book you wrote. Not the BDS one yet. I'm looking forward for that. But I've been a fan and really looking up to you. And I want to know, what is your advice for a speaker like me that I was arrested in University of Illinois a few months ago when they mocked my story of coming out, mocked me, started laughing at me when I told about my family being oppressed in Iraq and North Africa. Sharing my story was for them unbearable, and I keep on going through that, and I feel like there should be some legal implication for attacks like this on college campuses in the US and in Europe. I've experienced it almost everywhere.
There should be, but let me tell you how bad it's gotten. When the University of California at Irvine invited Michael Oren to speak, he was then the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Students for Justice for Palestine decided to shut him down. Very clearly, they have it on tape. Shut him down, don't let him speak. And every time he got up to speak, they shouted hysterically, they wouldn't stop, and 7 or so of them were arrested. The American Civil Liberties Union, which is supposed to defend free speech of speakers, came out on the side of those who stopped the speaker from speaking. That's how bad it's become. You get arrested for trying to exercise your freedom of speech. It has to stop. And we need to put together stories like yours and bring legal actions in the courts, in the administrative agencies, cutting off financial federal aid to universities that don't protect speakers like you. You have the right to speak. Your audience has the right to hear you. The protesters can boo episodically if you say something and they disagree with it, or they can hold up a sign, but they cannot stop you from speaking. And the American Civil Liberties Union, which I was on the national board of for years, is on the wrong side of this issue. It is no longer a civil liberties organization. It has turned into a left-wing political anti-Israel organization, at least some parts of it, in some parts of the United States. And we have to turn that around. And you can be very helpful, and we should work together and coordinate when you come to the United States to speak, to make sure that you have legal monitors with you, you have people who are supportive of the right to free speech, and we're on your side, and we're going to protect you and defend you and protect the right of people to listen to your very, very important message.
Now, I'd like to turn to Emily Schrader, who is also here sitting with us. She serves as the digital director of Stand With Us International. Emily, could you tell us a little bit about your work?
Yeah, so I represent a little bit different side, although Stand With Us does do a lot of activity on campus combating BDS. One of the main methods that the BDS movement is using to mobilize support for BDS is through social media. And the way that they do that is literally by harassing artists, musicians, or celebrities, or even individual activists who go to Israel to visit. So we see a lot of activity on social media about that. We do a lot to combat that and push back. And usually we're successful with major artists like J-Lo or also Radiohead. Sometimes we're not. So my question for Professor Dershowitz is there anything more that can be done to combat the hate speech and the cyberbullying that we see on social media? You know, such cyberbullying such as, you know, kill all the Jews, those kinds of comments that you see on social media, or just in terms of the general harassment that is on social media, so prevalent in the BDS movement?
It's a great question. First of all, Stand With Us is one of the great grassroots organizations. I am very supportive of it. I speak for it. I'm enthusiastic about what it does on campus. The little brochures and booklets that it hands out really energize students and give them the opportunity to make the case. Look, I dedicated my book to those brave and principled artists, academics, and business people who defy BDS and come to Israel and do business with Israel and entertain in Israel. We have to do more of that. We have to call out people. There's no difference between a singer like the singer from New Zealand who refused to perform in Israel. No difference between her and the bigoted baker who won't bake a cake for a gay marriage, or the bigoted person who refuses to rent to a black person, or the bigoted person who discriminates against a woman. When you discriminate only against the nation state of the Jewish people, you're engaged in bigotry. And we have to use the social media to call out the bigots who accept BDS and who refuse to go to Israel. These are people who would go to Cuba in a millisecond. These are people who would go to Iran. These are people who would go to Belarus, who would go to Russia, who would go to North Korea, but they won't go to Israel. There's a word for that. It's called anti-Semitism. When you single out only the nation state of the Jewish people for boycott, and we have to make it unacceptable morally for these people to refuse to come to Israel. Right now, they're regarded as heroes if they accept the BDS restrictions and don't go to Israel. People like Waters and others in England, they're regarded as heroes. We have to make sure they're seen in their true light as anti-Semitic villains who are no better than people who discriminate against African Americans, against women, against gays, and against other minorities.
Now, Alan, I mean, I'd like you also to respond to what he just said, but we've been focusing a lot on the BDS fight, more specifically on college campuses. There is a whole other battlefront, such as creating and enforcing legislation to fight BDS at the state and federal levels, and of course, in other countries around the world as well. What is being done today, and what do you think needs to be done?
Well, first of all, the legislation is appropriate and constitutional as long as it doesn't prohibit speech or expression, as long as it doesn't prohibit advocating BDS. People should be free to support BDS and advocate it. What they shouldn't be free to do is engage in economic discrimination. I mean, the analogy is very clear. Any racist has the right to say it's wrong for black people and white people to live together. It's wrong for gay people to be married. You can say that, but you can't refuse to rent to a gay married couple. You can't refuse to rent to a black person. And that's what BDS is. So as long as the statutes prohibit the economic activity of actually boycotting, they are constitutional and desirable morally. But if they make the mistake of moving to advocacy and speech, that's wrong, because bad speech should be combated in the marketplace of ideas. The answer to bad speech is good speech, but the answer to bad economic actions that discriminate based on religion is desirable and constitutional. Let's remember, too, the BDS movement applies only to Israeli Jews. It doesn't apply to Israeli Muslims, and therefore it is blatant religious discrimination. It also applies to non-Israeli Jews like me and like Matisyahu. The founder of BDS refused to debate me at the Oxford Union. I wish I had a chance to debate him and beat him at the Oxford Union, but he refused to debate me because he says I'm subject to BDS being a Jewish Zionist. That's just bigotry.
All right. Is there any last questions that you had for the professor before we move on to our next topic?
I was just going to add quickly what he touched on about anti-Semitism. That is something that Stand With Us does pretty regularly. We're working online to expose the other side of the BDS movement. On campus, like Ken mentioned, and also online, they're working to present themselves as something humanitarian. But the fact of the matter is it's not. It's discriminatory. It's anti-Semitic. So that is something that we're doing all the time on campus and on social media to expose the BDS movement for what it really is.
That's great, because, you know, my book begins by showing who the grandparents are of the BDS movement. The grandparents on one side were the Nazi boycott of Jews in the 1930s, and the grandparents on the other side was the Arab boycott against Israel when it was first established. BDS has nothing to do with the occupation, nothing to do with the settlements. I prove in my book it has everything to do with the existence of Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people, not with its policies.
All right, well, unfortunately, we have to move on to our next topic. Wayne Golosoy is a retired U.S. Army Master Sergeant living in Atlanta who just made his first trip to Israel. He has a question regarding President Trump's immigration policies, and he wonders if there are any similarities as to what is going on here in Israel. Let's hear from him.
Hi, Alan. Wayne Golosoy here, retired Master Sergeant, United States Army Reserve. I served on the U.S.-Mexican border in Arizona a few years back, and I wanted to know what your opinion was regarding the wall, and then comparing Israel and the United States regarding the immigration policy. And by the way, what the heck happened to the Patriots?
Yeah, great question. The Patriots were outplayed by the Eagles. I have to tell you, they were outplayed. They were outcoached. I don't know why Butler was kept out of the game. They claimed for disciplinary reasons. I think it hurt the team tremendously. But you got to give credit to the Eagles. The Eagles have great ownership, great management, and with a rookie quarterback playing against the greatest quarterback in the history of football, you just have to take your hat off and congratulate them. And I do it at every opportunity. In terms of immigration policy, there's no comparison. President Trump can talk all he wants about criminals coming across the border, but the vast majority of people who come across the border come across to work in Arizona, to work in California, to help with the various agricultural industries that the United States depends on workers from Mexico. Sure, there are some bad apples, and it's the job of people like you to sort out the bad apples from the vast majority of people who really want to come to America in order to improve their lot. The differences in Israel, obviously, terrorism is a serious problem, and crime is a serious problem, and Israel has to have the ability to maintain its security. Look, I am critical of Israel's current approach. I don't think that Israel should be immediately deporting or threatening with imprisonment people who came to Israel for a better life. The first thing Israel should do is announce unequivocally, and they've already done this, but they have to do it over and over and over again, that Israel will never turn away a genuine refugee. Israel is a country of refugees. Israel was founded on the law of return, and the law of return can't be restricted in terms of how it applies in practice only to people who are escaping persecution because they're Jews. So anybody escaping persecution, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, or background, who is a real refugee, has to be welcomed into Israel. Then you have two other categories. You have the bad people, the people who come here and for bad reasons, for prostitution, for drugs, for other crimes, and they should be deported. In fact, many Ukrainians have been deported. White Ukrainians have been deported. But then there's the very difficult middle category, and that is decent, good people who come to Israel to get a better job, to have a better life, economic migrants. Under the law, they're not obligated to be kept in a country, but Israel has to create a humanitarian approach to how to deal with the problem. I've suggested the appointment of Natan Sharansky, who, of course, himself was a refugee, to be appointed to come up with a humanitarian solution, particularly to the middle category of economic people who are coming to find a job, and to make sure that no real refugee is ever turned away. So I don't think there are really comparisons, but I think both countries have to be more welcoming. Both countries are countries built on immigration, and they have to show a little bit more rachmanut. My grandmother would call it rachmanis, on behalf of people who are not of our ethnic background, not of our religion. Im ein ani li mili, yes, but if I am for my own self alone, what am I? We have to accept both parts of Hillel's admonition.
All right, well, unfortunately, it's time to move on to our next topic, but it is a little more lighthearted. Space. Well, we've been busy trying to solve the problems here on Earth. There was a gathering of some of the top scientists, researchers, and astronauts on the planet here in Israel for Space Week. And as you can assume, they were looking beyond, literally. Now here's a message from some of the top guns.
Shalom, Alan. Okay. We're here in Tel Aviv for the Israeli Space Week, commemorating Ilan Ramon and the crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia. There's amazing energy here, and it's great to see such positivity about the future in space.
And a shout out to our friend Adam Dershowitz, flight controller, engineer, pilot, all around good guy, definitely certified smart guy. Hello from us.
Hi, Alan. My name is Charlie Bolden. I'm the immediate past administrator of NASA. I'm here with your friend Danny Grossman, and we're attending the Alan Ramon Space Conference, where we're watching kids be inspired, having a great time with kids from all over Israel, Arab, Muslim, Jewish, you name it. And look forward to maybe meeting you sometime, sitting down and talking about a little philosophy. So take care of yourself. Shalom.
Well, thank you so much. Especially thank you for the shout out to my nephew, Adam. As you know, Adam was supposed to be an astronaut, and he was in the program. And then they discovered he had been born with one kidney. Nobody ever knew that. And he fought hard, arguing that one kidney is as good as two when you're in space. But they wouldn't allow him to join the astronaut program itself. So he became a ground controller and lived in Houston for many years, met Ilan Ramon and many of the other astronauts. When he got married, one of the astronauts took his wedding ring and his wife's wedding ring up to space. So he wears a wedding ring that's been in space. He's named his two children. One of his sons his son is called Mars, and his daughter is called Zara Columbia. And so he still has close associations with space, and we're very, very proud of what he does on Earth to help space programs. So thank you, and thank you for coming to Israel and working so closely together with Israeli space program and other space programs in order to help achieve peace. Thank you. Kol hakavod.
All right, Professor Dershowitz, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you for your time. And I, of course, would like to thank all of our guests today. If you would like Professor Dershowitz to answer your questions, go to our Facebook page and submit them. We'll see you again next week.